I don't know how famous they are outside of England, but certainly here they're very famous for their lorries. Hi guys, and welcome back to a sunny Phil's Corner. My name is Phil, and if you haven't guessed already, this is a channel all about football shirts. It's been a couple of weeks since my last video, but go and check that out. We talked about MLS kits of the 90s, there were some really fun kits, but today's video is going to be all about shirts that are based on sponsors. Now, sponsors are an interesting topic in shirts, and it's something I like to talk a lot about. And as you might have guessed, we're also going to look closely at this Inter Milan third shirt. And it's probably my favourite shirt of this season. Of course, it's a design also that's very much based on the Pirelli sponsor. So we'll talk about that. I'll get the shirt off the wall and we'll go through some of the details. I love this shirt. It's one of my favourites, as I say, of this year. But before I go any further, a huge thank you to Kit & Bone. Kit & Bone are once again sponsoring this video, and a huge thank you to them for their support. Go and check them out. They do loads of great products. They do prints, they do shirts. If you're looking for gifts for yourself or for a friend, for someone who's into shirts, go and check them out because they really are good. And if you're new to this channel, please subscribe. It would really mean lots to have your ongoing support. And if you enjoy the video, please like and share the video with your friends. And leave a comment as well. And talking of comments, I like to answer some of your comments from the previous videos on every episode. So we'll start with those comments. Firstly, a really interesting comment from Oliver here. He says, as much as I enjoy the wild MLS kits of the 90s, the current situation with the single manufacturer, of course, being Adidas, adds a lot to the merging of classic US sports and European football culture, in his opinion. This is a really interesting opinion, Oliver. I don't think many people actually would consider that having a single manufacturer is actually adding a lot to the league, but I do think there is something to what you're saying there. I think certainly with MLS as a league in general, there's been very much a shift towards trying to introduce European elements, and you can see that certainly in a lot of the newer teams, the way they branded themselves, the way they presented themselves. I think if you look more broadly at the fan culture as well, there's been a real emphasis amongst certain clubs, but I think broadly speaking the league as well, to push the idea of ultras, if you like, and tifos, and these elements which are very much part of European football culture. But you're seeing that a lot in the MLS, and in some ways they're doing it just as well, if not better. And whilst from a kit perspective, I don't think we've quite seen the fruition of that. I don't think we've quite seen the kind of the vibrancy of the European kit scene, if you like, in the MLS. Having Adidas on board does add a lot of potential because, of course, Adidas have the history of many European teams, as well as their own history in America. So I think there's a lot of potential there. And I think the key deciding factor will be if Adidas can create more bespoke designs for MLS teams. If we start to see that, and if we start to see Adidas maybe bring in some of their own European experience in more ways into kits, I think that would add a lot of potential. Because of course Adidas as a whole, despite having a lot of templated kits in recent years, have some amazing designs, both modern and old. So I think that would be really cool to see. And hopefully, as you're suggesting there, Oliver, we'll see more of the influence of European kit culture coming through. So I think with Adidas on board, that's very much a potential there. We've probably not seen it quite to the full, I would argue, but really interesting. So thank you for bringing that up, Oliver. Next up we have Gort, and he says, I think it's a shame Galaxy dropped the amber shirts with the dark green sash when Beckham signed, and I couldn't agree more. Those Galaxy kits were absolutely superb. The colour scheme, the design was a really nice combination, and of course the crest that the Galaxy had at that time as well matched the design of the shirts perfectly. I think it is a real shame that they went for the white and navy scheme. Now don't get me wrong, there were some great kits, and of course with David Beckham coming in around that time as well, it made sense to almost rebrand the club in a sense, but there was certainly a little bit that was lost in that change. Now you might remember on my last video, I asked you to suggest some potential NBA teams that I should follow. I said I'd like to get into the NBA more, and there were some great suggestions, a couple of them here, including from Cami, who suggested the Brooklyn Nets. And actually they're a team that were on my radar because recently they used a grey court, which was a really strange looking design, but it really stood out, and I loved the design of that court. And he wasn't the only one, we had others as well. Philip suggested the Toronto Raptors, which is a really great shout from a jersey perspective. Certainly that classic dinosaur design on the front was amazing. I really enjoy looking at those from the 90s. So thanks to Cami, thanks to Philip, thanks for all your suggestions. And finally there's a comment here from the Rose or the Rovers, I hope I said that right. Second only to the J-League, they say. Those retro MLS kits are awesome. And actually, yeah, the J-League is an incredible league for shirts. One of the shirts in the list today is a J-League classic, and I've actually recently bought as well a J-League shirt, which I'm very excited to share with you. So that is going to be coming up very soon. We will look at some J-League shirts, probably a subject for more than one video, but we will look at 90s J-League very soon, so thank you for that suggestion. But now let's talk about sponsor-based shirts. Now if you follow me on Twitter, you might have had a hint that this was coming, because I was talking earlier this week about this very subject, because it's one of those things which really fascinates me about kits. It's something which has come up in previous episodes. We talked about Fiorentina and their sponsors. They're probably one of the best examples. And even in the modern era, teams like Inter with the Pirelli sponsor. I recently wrote an article about Seattle Sounders shirts and the Xbox sponsor, which I love as well. And sponsors, of course, are often synonymous with a particular team. But sometimes a sponsor goes even further. Sometimes the design of a shirt is heavily informed by the logo or the product of a particular sponsor. And that's what this video is all about. There have been many shirts that are based on sponsors. It's certainly not a new phenomenon. But I wanted to look at some of my favourites, and we're going to start all the way from the early 80s, from the early days of shirt sponsorship, right up to this current season. And we'll start in the only place we can start really on this subject. That is Coventry. Coventry have had some amazing shirts over the years. They're one of those great English teams for shirts. But back in the early 80s, they had an incredible design. This is a shirt you've probably seen before. It's certainly one of the most infamous shirt designs of all time. This is the 1981 Coventry home shirt, which is actually masquerading as a giant advert for Talbot, the car manufacturer. Now, Talbot had sponsored Coventry in previous years with a much more tasteful design. And this was in the very early days of sponsorship when many clubs were still testing the waters. But in 1981, this incredible design came out. Talbot, of course, their logo featured very, very prominently. I can't really say that enough, as it comes across the entirety of the shirt and continues down to the shorts. That's my favourite detail here, the way the T of the Talbot logo runs through seamlessly into the shorts. It's an incredible look, but actually as a kit, in a funny way, I would say it actually looks quite good. I mean, certainly the design, of course, isn't one for purists, but it is easily one of the most audacious bits of shirt design. An incredible look. As you'd expect, the design was actually banned in certain competitions because of the explicit use of shirt sponsorship. But what a fascinating design, a fascinating example of shirt sponsorship going to the next level. And as I say, I would argue that the kit in itself actually has something about it from an aesthetic point of view. Next, we're going to go to the J-League. I talked about the J-League before, and we're going to go to one of the most famous Japanese club sides. That's Shimizu S-Pulse. Now, if you don't know the name Shimizu S-Pulse, you probably do know their shirts because they are famous, world famous, for their bright orange shirts with a map of Japan on them. They had these incredible designs with actually quite an intricate map detailing Japan and surrounding countries. What is the design all about? Well, their main sponsors, and I believe they're still sponsoring them in some capacity today, were Japan Airlines. Now, their logo there is on the front, the JAL, and of course that map design very much relates to the company. But what's interesting about that is that that theme continued for several years, and even in more modern kits when Japan Airlines were not the primary sponsor on the front, Shimizu S-Pulse have still nodded to that history, which is a lot of fun, and it's certainly an identity for the club. Not only that bright orange colour and the yellow as well, used as an accent colour, but the fact they've actually got a map as their shirt is incredible, and it's all thanks to their sponsor. So that's a really great example from the J-League. We'll jump back to Europe now, and this is a more subtle example, but it's one of those designs where when you see it, you can't unsee it. This is Frankfurt's shirt from 1993. Now, both the home shirt and the away shirt featured this really interesting design with an X and a line. And you look at that design, it looks like quite a creative geometric look. But actually, you look closely and it mimics the logo of Tetra Pak. I believe they're a food packaging company. And Actually, you can see it more clearly as you zoom in on the logo and you see it against the shirt design. You can see there it's actually a blown up version of the sponsor's logo. Now this is a great example of taking a sponsor logo and being quite creative with it. Of course, you can see it's pretty much an exact copy from the logo, but the fact it's much more zoomed in and cropped makes the design a lot more palpable. It doesn't look immediately like a big advert, even though it is basically the sponsor logo. But I think the shirt looks particularly good. I love the yellow away variant as well. This is the time when JJ Okocha was there, so it's a really nice kind of cult kit actually to get hold of if you do see it around. So Frankfurt in the early 90s there, showing I think a really creative take on the sponsor based shirt. Staying in the 90s, this is a connection which I didn't realise until just this week, and this is the Ajax 1991-93 away shirt. Now one of the key features of Ajax shirts from the 90s and the noughties was the vertical sponsor, the sponsor of ABN AMRO. Now you might not know much about ABN AMRO apart from the fact that their sponsor was written in that way for so many Ajax shirts. But they're a bank, and back in 1991 they started sponsoring Ajax, and the design of Ajax's first away shirt sponsored by ABN AMRO was heavily influenced by the logo of the company. And this is incredible, something which I never spotted before, but if you look at the logo of ABN AMRO, you can see both the colourway, which is this wonderful teal colour with the gold or the yellow, has been replicated on the shirt quite heavily from the logo. And even the design, which has the kind of almost half chevron there, again mimics the logo of ABN AMRO. I've known about that Ajax shirt for a long time, but I've never known that it was linked to the logo of the bank. And actually when I started looking back and doing a bit of research, it's quite notable that Ajax hadn't had a shirt of that colour scheme before. They predominantly used blue or light blue, but not this greener shade before. So talk about a bold move to start sponsoring a club and immediately introducing an away shirt based on your company's colour scheme. It sounds like the kind of thing which, if it happened now, would cause widespread uproar. And it's particularly interesting that ABN AMRO went on to sponsor Ajax for so many years. I think it was over 15 years that they sponsored Ajax shirts, and it all started in the early 90s with a kit design that was very much focused on the sponsor rather than Ajax. Jumping back to England, we have the Carlisle United 1995-97 away shirt. Now most of the shirts on this list I think are quite aesthetically pleasing. I'll be honest, with the Carlisle United one here, it's a little bit harder to stomach, but there is something about it because it is based heavily on Eddie Stobart's 90s colour scheme. Now Eddie Stobart, I don't know how famous they are outside of England, but certainly here they're very famous for their lorries, and the colour scheme is very distinctive. And the design of Carlisle's away shirt here is very much linked to the colour scheme of Eddie Stobart. As I say, I don't think it's the most aesthetically pleasing kit, but having said that, I think as an away shirt there's certainly something about it. Is it a pretty kit? I don't think it is, but I love the story behind this one. Now the penultimate shirt on this list is actually a team rather than a particular shirt. This is Evian Tonneau Gaillard Football Club, I hope I said that right, and they're a French team who are quite notable in the shirt world for having a mountain design across their shirts. Of course mimicking the logo of Evian, the water company, one of the biggest brands of water in the world, and of course they're one of the key parts of the club themselves. A very young club who only started I believe in 2007 I think it was, but the consistent theme, a bit like Shimizu S-Pos with their map theme. Evian continue to use mountains across their kit. I think in Evian's case here, the mountain design actually lends itself quite well to shirts. French shirts are typically quite busy with a number of sponsors, so there is an element there where it only adds to the clutter, but at the same time I really like that ongoing theme. And yeah, some logos don't particularly look good on shirts. I think if you took many sponsors in today's game and tried to make a shirt out of them, they wouldn't look good. But there are some examples like Evian here when the sponsor actually looks quite nice on the kit. Evian shirts are helped by a really pleasing colour scheme that includes a lovely light shade of pink. I'll flash up a particular kit here which I really like. You've got the Evian logo there again, but that really lovely light soft baby pink. It looks great on the kit. But yeah, I think this kit is kind of on the other end of the spectrum to the Carlisle kit there. Really lovely, aesthetically pleasing French number there. And finally, we'll get on to Inter's shirt. Now, Inter's third shirt from this season has been the talk of the football shirt world since it came out. Not everyone loves this design, but I do. And actually, the main reason I like this shirt is that it is the first Inter shirt which has really celebrated Pirelli in a big way. Now, why is that a good thing? Surely a football shirt should be primarily celebrating the club, not the sponsor. Well, actually, Pirelli and Inter have one of those long-standing relationships. Pirelli have sponsored Inter kits since the mid-90s. And since the mid-90s, this is the first Inter shirt where we've actually had the full colour yellow and red Pirelli sponsor. I'll just take the shirt off the wall now and we can go through this in more detail. Look at that there, that full colour Pirelli logo. Pirelli have actually been really accommodating. If you look back over any Inter shirt, they almost always have their logo with just the word mark in white or the colour to match the kit. And they've very rarely actually clashed with the design of an Inter shirt. But in this example, we get to see the full logo there. And it's not just the logo and the colour scheme which match the Pirelli brand. Even just the design of the cuffs here, the thin yellow line mimics the trim of Pirelli tyres. And I love that design. It's a subtle design nod to Pirelli. Of course, not just on the cuffs, but the collar as well, with a simple crew neck, again with the yellow trim, like a tyre. The tyre theme is continued in a subliminal pattern. Now, it's not easy to see sometimes depending on the lighting, but there are some diagonal elements and some detailed elements which again mimic Pirelli tyres. Even just looking at the crest, the Inter crest in the black and yellow, it almost looks a bit like a tyre. So there's a lot of tyre themes going on, but I think just from an aesthetic point of view, it's a gorgeous kit, it really is. It's the kind of shirt which any club would be proud to have. In terms of other details, I'll flip it on the back. It's really good to see the pattern continue on the back. Of course, it's a very subliminal pattern, but nonetheless, I really like that. And I think it's awesome that after so many years of sponsoring the club, Pirelli have essentially got this chance to really celebrate the brand and the partnership of the brand with Inter. Of course, this is a third shirt, and I think that again adds a lot of credibility to the design. If this was a home shirt, I think you would start to ask more questions. But as a third shirt, and a really good looking third shirt at that, I think this is great. I think when we look back at Inter kits in 20, 30 years time, this will stand out as one of the best Inter kits of the modern era. So there we go, some sponsor-based shirts right from Coventry in the 80s to Inter of this season. Before I go, you might have noticed a new book on my shelf. That is Football Type 2. Now, I haven't mentioned this book before, but I did talk about I Belong to Jesus on a previous episode, and that was a fantastic book which designer Rick Banks was involved in. And Rick has come back this year with a sequel to Football Type, an award-winning book about football typography. Now, a couple of episodes ago, I talked about typography. Go and check that out. That was episode 4. But if you're into football typography in the slightest, or if you're into shirts, if you're watching this video now, this book is a must-have. It really is. It's a gorgeous celebration of fonts and typefaces over the years. But not only that, but Dennis Hurley, as you may know as Museum of Jerseys, was involved in the writing of the book. Now, Dennis is a great guy. He's one of the football shirt experts, someone that I look up to professionally. And he was involved in writing the book. So there's some great people behind this project. I'm sure you'll see as I'm showing these images just how exciting the book is. So go and check that out. You can still buy it. And there's also limited edition covers, like the one behind me, with unique dust covers featuring numbers from the book. So go and check that out. That's Football Type 2. This isn't an ad. I've not been paid to say this. It is just a book that I absolutely love. But thank you for watching this video. Once again, please subscribe, like and comment on the video if you enjoyed it. Share the video with friends. It means a lot to see people sharing their feedback. Thanks to Kit & Bone for sponsoring this video once again. And thanks to you for watching. I'll see you very soon.